Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a request from, well, let's just say a future diplomat out there prepping for the UPSC exams. With international relations as their chosen field, we're diving in Plato's political thought. It's going to be a deep one.
Yeah, and it's not just some theoretical, exercise. If you're trying to understand the world of international relations, you got to get Plato's Republic, and even more importantly, I think the critiques it faced over the years. I mean, that's what's really going to equip you to analyze those global systems and ideologies, to really break them down.
You got it. Today's big question, was Plato the, architect of totalitarianism, or was he a champion of justice? And does his wisdom still hold up?
And to get to the bottom of that, we're looking at some 20th century critiques of the Republic. And keep in mind, this wasn't just some ivory tower debate. I mean, these critiques came out when the world was dealing with, Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, real-life dystopias.
Wow. So, while the world's staring down these totalitarian regimes, they're also debating this, seemingly utopian model proposed thousands of years ago.
Exactly. So scholars like Feit and Crossman, they didn't hold back. They basically put Plato on trial, saying he pushed for a system, run by elites, one that just completely ignored individual rights. And forget about freedom of thought.
Okay, hold on. Can you give us a specific example? Why'd they say that?
All right, so take Feit. He was really bothered by the whole philosopher-king thing, this tiny elite, maybe 1% of the population, calling all the shots. He actually compared it to, get this, communist Russia. And let me tell you, back in the 1930s, that was not a good look.
Oh, wow. So we're saying Plato was a proto-communist.
Not exactly. We got to remember the context, right? I mean, these critiques came from the anxieties of the 20th century. Liberal democracies, with their focus on individual rights, they felt threatened by the rise of totalitarian regimes. So
they were kind of reading their own fears into Plato's ancient ideas.
in a way, yeah. But that tells us something really interesting about, how we view history. It's always through the lens of our own time.
That's a good point. It's we're always looking for reflections of our own, hopes and fears in the past. But surely not everyone was anti-Plato.
Of course not. Some scholars, like Winspear and Toynbee, they got the whole authoritarian potential in Plato's stuff, but they argued his goals were noble. They saw him as a guy deeply concerned about, the moral decay of Athenian society, trying to build a system that would bring justice and harmony.
So not a power-hungry dictator, but a philosopher trying to figure out, the age-old question, how do you build a fair and thriving society?
Exactly. And then you have scholars like Jode, who went a step further. He completely separated Plato's ideal state from fascism. He said Plato wasn't about empowering a few, but ensuring justice and happiness for everyone.
Interesting. So we've got this back and forth on how to interpret him. Totalitarian Plato versus justice Plato. And this is where it gets really interesting for, our future UPSC diplomats, especially those focusing on international relations.
Totally. Think about it. You're a diplomat negotiating a treaty, or maybe trying to understand a country's foreign policy. Understanding these different views on Plato, man, that gives you an edge.
Like having a secret decoder ring for global politics, right?
Yeah.
But before we get too comfy with this, let's bring in a heavy hitter, Karl Popper.
Popper. His take on Plato was legendary. He straight up called Plato an enemy of the open society. And that concept, the open society, that's central to everything, modern democracies, international relations, everything.
Okay, so Popper didn't pull any punches. What's the deal? Why do you see Plato as such a threat to this whole open society thing?
Popper believed that Plato's whole vision, this strict society ruled by an elite, would crush freedom, kill innovation, even, block the search for truth.
But didn't Plato say his system was for the greater good? For everyone.
Yeah, he did. But Popper's counter was that such a rigid system, with its fixed blueprint, it would just lead to stagnation, to oppression. He said real progress comes from open debate, from challenging the status quo, from dissent. Basically, the stuff Plato wanted to control.
So are we saying Plato was wrong? Just flat out wrong?
It's not about right or wrong, really. It's more about, recognizing how complex these ideas are and how their interpretations have evolved over time. Popper wasn't saying Plato didn't care about justice or harmony. His point was those goals are better achieved in an open society where you've got individual freedom and critical thinking.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this. It's not just about Plato himself, but about these big questions, the nature of society, power, what justice actually means.
Exactly. And for someone studying for the UPSC, especially with a focus on international relations, that's crucial, you know?
Yeah.
Think about it. The world's full of different political systems, different ideologies, different visions of the future.
It's like ancient philosophy is suddenly a crash course in global politics.
That's the cool part. Plato's ideas and all the critiques they sparked give us a framework to analyze this complex world stage.
So even if we don't agree with every single thing Plato said, just engaging with his work, it makes us think more critically, right?
Absolutely. That's why this deep dive is so valuable for, our future diplomats out there.
Speaking of our future diplomats, let's unpack some key concepts from Plato's Republic that you'll see on the UPSC syllabus. First up, the philosopher-king.
So Plato basically imagined a leader, not just a politician, but like a super wise philosopher, someone who could make decisions based on, what's truly best for everyone. He called this ideal ruler the philosopher-king.
So imagine a world leader who's like deeply into ethics, logic, the whole truth-seeking thing. But does that really work in the real world?
That's the question, isn't it? And for anyone studying for the UPSC, especially international relations, you really got to think about this concept. I mean, throughout history, we've seen all kinds of leaders, all kinds of systems. Some are more authoritarian, some democratic. Plato's philosopher-king just adds another layer to that. It's like, what if leadership was about wisdom, not just ambition?
Pretty compelling idea, but maybe a little too idealistic for, the messy world of international politics.
Yeah, maybe. But it does make you think about what we should look for in our leaders. Should they have a deep understanding of history, of ethics? Should they be driven by, like, a vision of the common good? These are questions that are still relevant today.
Totally. It's like Plato's giving us a measuring stick to, see how our leaders measure up. But let's move on to another big idea from the Republic, one that's also huge in international relations: justice in society.
Now, this is where things get interesting. I mean, Plato spent a ton of time in the Republic trying to define justice. What does a just society actually look like? How do you balance individual rights with what's good for the community? These are questions that are, like, at the core of so many international relations dilemmas.
Right. Imagine you're a diplomat trying to, mediate a conflict or advocating for human rights. Understanding how different people see justice, that's crucial.
Exactly. Think about the debates we're having right now about, when it's okay for one country to interfere in another country's business, or how to create global institutions that are fair and promote cooperation. Plato was grappling with these same things centuries ago.
It's amazing how these, ancient philosophical questions are still so relevant today.
That's Plato for you. His ideas give us a framework to think about these timeless problems. And for our UPSC folks, these are must-know concepts.
Okay, we've got the philosopher-king, justice in society. Let's tackle another controversial one: education and social control.
Yeah, Plato believed education was like the foundation of a just and harmonious society. But he also thought there needed to be a level of social control that, honestly, might freak some people out today.
It's almost like he predicted the problems we have now with, fake news and propaganda, right? Back then it was poets and storytellers who could sway public opinion. Now it's social media.
Exactly. We might not agree with, Plato's specific ideas about censorship, but his worries about the power of information, they're still relevant. Think about the debates around fake news, or how social media algorithms can be manipulated, or the role of education in teaching people how to think critically.
It's like he's warning us about, the dangers of unchecked information and how important it is to have citizens who can think for themselves.
Definitely. And that leads us to another key concept that goes hand in hand with social control: the dangers of utopian thinking.
Okay, remind me, why is utopian thinking dangerous? I mean, it sounds good, right? Striving for a perfect world.
Well, the idea is great, but, history has shown us that when people try to create utopia, it often ends up as tyranny and oppression.
Yeah, we see that all the time. Regimes that start with good intentions but end up doing terrible things in the name of achieving their perfect vision.
And that's where Popper's critique of Plato comes in again,
Popper, the open society guy. Refresh my memory. What was his main point again?
Popper believed that societies need to be open to change, to disagreement, to the free flow of ideas. He saw Plato's vision, this rigid, unchanging social order, as a recipe for disaster.
So are we saying all utopian visions are bad?
Not really. It's just crucial to understand the potential problems. I mean, when we become so focused on creating this perfect world, we risk losing individual freedom and we stifle the creativity and innovation that drives progress.
It's a danger that's not just limited to ancient Greece, right? We've seen it throughout history and we're still seeing it today.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Think about regimes that silence dissent, control information, and try to force one single ideology on everyone. That's the closed society Popper warned us about.
And it's not just countries, right? It's also happening on the global stage.
Absolutely. Think about the debates about internet censorship, regulating social media, the role of international organizations in promoting democracy and human rights. It's this age-old struggle between openness and control playing out in the modern world.
It's kind of mind-blowing how these ancient philosophical concepts can help us understand these really complex issues today.
That's the beauty of studying political thought. It gives us the tools to analyze not just what's happening, but why it's happening and what the deeper implications are.
And for those aspiring diplomats, that's pure gold. Being able to connect those philosophical dots can help them navigate the world of international relations.
Now, let's switch gears a bit. We got to talk about one of the most, let's say, out there ideas in Plato's Republic, his thoughts on family and property.
All right, now things are getting really interesting. So Plato proposed this system of communal living for the guardian class, the
Yeah.
elite rulers of his ideal society. No private property, no traditional families. It was all about putting the state first above individual desires.
Imagine no owning your own home, no choosing who you marry. That's pretty radical, even today.
Yeah, that wouldn't fly in the 21st century. So what was Plato trying to do with this?
He thought that by getting rid of private property and traditional families, you'd get rid of conflict and division in society. Like, if people don't have possessions or blood ties, they're less likely to be selfish or put their own needs ahead of the
They'll
state's.
like get rid of all the stuff that makes people greedy so they can focus on the greater good.
Kinda, yeah. But remember, Plato was writing in a totally different time. He was worried about all the instability and corruption he saw in Athens, and he thought these extreme measures were necessary to create a better society.
I get that. It's easy to say these ideas are outdated and unrealistic, but they do raise important questions about individual freedom versus the needs of society.
Exactly. Even if we don't agree with the specifics of what Plato's proposing, the fact that he was willing to challenge conventional wisdom and explore these radical solutions, it makes us think harder about the trade-offs involved in building a just and stable society.
And for someone preparing for the UPSC, understanding this is key. When you're dealing with things like international development, humanitarian aid, conflict resolution, you're going to run into different cultural norms and values.
Right. And having a good understanding of how different societies have tried to balance individual freedom with collective responsibility, that's super valuable.
So even if we don't end up advocating for it, like Plato's communal living arrangements, grappling with his ideas gives us a more nuanced perspective on today's global challenges.
Now, let's talk about a common criticism of the Republic: the lack of dissenting voices. Throughout the whole dialogue, it seems like Plato's characters just agree with everything he says.
Yeah, it feels kind of staged, like everyone's conveniently on board with these radical ideas.
Well, some critics say this makes the Republic more of a philosophical thought experiment than, a practical plan for governing. But keep in mind, in some of his later works, like the Laws, Plato does explore different systems and perspectives.
So it's not like he was completely closed off to other ideas. Maybe in the Republic, he was just more focused on presenting a clear vision of his ideal society.
Yeah, could be. And even within the Republic, Plato brings up some really thought-provoking questions about, the nature of power, justice, what it means to be human.
Right, even if we don't agree with his answers, he's making us confront these big questions.
Exactly. And that's what makes studying Plato so valuable, even now.
It's like he's this, intellectual sparring partner, making us think harder and refine our own ideas about what a good society looks like.
And for our UPSC preppers, that kind of intellectual flexibility is super important. I mean, dealing with international relations, you need to be able to see things from different angles, weigh different values, come up with creative solutions.
Well said. Okay, let's take a step back for a second and think about the historical context of Plato's work. The Republic was written during a really chaotic time in ancient Greece.
Right. Athenian democracy was struggling with internal conflicts and threats from outside. People were starting to lose faith in their institutions and values.
It's almost like Plato was trying to offer a solution to all that chaos. He saw his ideal society as a way to bring stability and order to a world that felt like it was falling apart.
It's definitely possible. And it's interesting to think about how that historical context might have shaped his thinking.
I'm starting to see how understanding the history behind Plato's work can help us understand his ideas better.
Absolutely. And for our UPSC friends, that historical awareness is crucial. When you're analyzing what's happening in the world today, you need to understand the historical forces that got us here.
It's like having a time machine that lets you see how the past is still influencing the present.
I like that. And that brings us back to the heart of this deep dive. We're not just exploring ancient philosophy for fun. We're using it to understand international relations.
So even if Plato's Republic isn't a practical how-to guide for governing today, it gives us some really valuable insights into the challenges of building a just and sustainable world.
Exactly. And for all those future diplomats out there engaging with these ideas, it's like a mental workout. It strengthens your analytical skills and helps you think critically.
Well put. Okay, before we wrap up this part, let's talk directly to our UPSC audience. You've chosen international relations, which is a really exciting and demanding field.
It is. It's a world of complex geopolitics, ethical dilemmas, and constantly searching for peaceful solutions.
And we truly believe that studying political philosophy, even ideas that might seem, ancient or impractical, can give you an advantage.
It's about really understanding the ideas that has shaped human civilization, the different ways people have thought about justice and power throughout history.
It's about learning to think critically and creatively about the problems facing the world today.
We hope this deep dive into Plato's Republic has given you some useful tools and insights as you start your journey.
And remember, learning never stops. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep working to make the world a more just and peaceful place. All right, deep divers, back for the final lap. As we wrap up our Plato's Republic deep dive, let's break down those key takeaways, especially for our future diplomats out there.
Yeah, good idea. Let's tie it all together. We've gone through Plato's whole vision of an ideal society, with philosopher-kings, the focus on justice, and those unique ideas about social control.
And we've talked about all the critiques, right? Especially from those who saw his ideas as a roadblock to freedom and like a danger to the open society.
And through all of that, we've found some pretty valuable insights that are super helpful for anyone trying to navigate, the world of international relations.
So for our UPSC folks, get your notes ready. First up, different strokes for different folks when it comes to justice.
Exactly. We've seen how different cultures and civilizations define justice in their own way. Think about the debates we have today about human rights, intervening in other countries' affairs and trying to create a global system that's actually fair. It all comes down to how you see justice.
It's like Plato's giving us a lens to look at these debates, even if we don't agree with every single thing he says.
Exactly. Takeaway number 2, utopia, great idea, but the execution, not so much. I mean, who doesn't want a perfect world? But history shows us that when you try to force those utopian dreams on society, it can get ugly. Tyranny, oppression, the whole 9 yards.
And that's where Popper's whole open society argument comes in. He's reminding us that those big, sweeping solutions usually backfire. Real progress is slow and steady, open to debate, willing to adapt. Learn from our mistakes.
Which brings us to our final takeaway. Ancient wisdom for modern problems. Plato's Republic might not be a step-by-step guide to building the perfect society, but it pushes us to think hard about the challenges we face today. Think outside the box.
Like he's talking to us across centuries,
Yeah.
challenging us to question what we think we know and have those tough conversations about the kind of world we want.
And to leave you with a final thought, our aspiring diplomats. Could Plato's ideal state, with all its focus on expertise and wisdom, actually be better equipped to handle the big stuff we're facing now? Climate change, pandemics, all that.
That's a good one. Really makes you think about what we need from our leaders in the 21st century. A big thank you to everyone for joining us for this deep dive into Plato's political thought.
We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did.
And to our dedicated UPSC aspirants, best of luck on your journey to becoming those future diplomats and global thinkers.
If you liked this deep dive, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like.
And definitely share your thoughts on this complex and fascinating topic. Until next time, keep those minds sharp and those conversations going.